Welcome to Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast brought to you by Jack and Coke. I'm your host, Pete B. I've got Sam Jesse here. Sam, how you doing, man?
Doing well. It's not going to be a ton of fun conversation tonight, but I think it'll be a really good conversation, Pete.
Yeah, we're gonna have some. We're gonna try and have some
We're gonna
fun.
have
Drink
fun.
a little bit of beer. I have a beer.
Monday
here.
was fun.
Monday, you said?
Yeah, Monday was a blast.
Yeah. College football Monday was fun. And the basketball team got a win too, which was nice.
Women's team just got a win tonight.
That's right. VT lost to Clemson, though, this past weekend, 24-14. We're going to recap the game in a little bit. First, I need Sam to give us a cheers.
Yeah, my cheers is, well, I guess, first and foremost, I had a fun time Saturday. The game sucked, but it was beautiful weather. Hokie Nation was out. Tailgate was fun.
It looked like a lot of fun.
So yeah, good weather Saturday, because that was probably the best part. I believe Kirk Herbstreit said on College Game Day that the most exciting part of the game would be Enter Sandman. And I'd argue the blocked field goal return touchdown was pretty sick.
Yeah, Kirk was wrong.
Fun moment.
He was wrong.
Maybe it's to Quentin Reddish and Beamer Ball making
Cheers
a play.
to that. Cheers.
It's hard to cheers after that game, though, Pete. It really is.
You know, and I think we should also mention and send our T's and P's to Gabe Williams and his family, because
crazy.
The story of him not only getting hurt, but then his father having a health scare as well, and maybe even more than a scare, was just terrible. And Gabe, we wish you and your family and your father the best. So we'll put some prayers up for that. But I will transition out of that sadness because Gabe was discharged from the hospital and he'll be okay. He just needs surgery. Let's talk just a little bit about the rankings we got last night, Sam. Because we don't have a game to preview, I figured we could chat quickly about the CFP rankings. College Football Monday always comes out before these come out. So I have them up on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. And if you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. We really are helped by any likes and any comments you can give us. But Oregon is number 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, and Indiana 5. You'll notice that 4 out of the top 5 are Big Ten teams, Sam.
Yeah.
Anything else stand out to you?
Oh, shoot. A lot stands out. First off, it is a good mixture of the two brackets that we had. I think Ole Miss being there at 11 is pretty telling because they're like last team in. I think Notre Dame being at 9 is pretty telling because if they're at 9 and they win out, like they're really safe, right? Mm-hmm. So Bama is there at the 10 spot, Ole Miss at the 12, Boise at the Ole Miss at the 11, Boise at the 12. That is interesting because a lot of people have been talking about if Boise wins out, could they be the 11 seed? Could they be the 10 seed? We'll see about that. There's a lot of football to be played, but I thought it was a pretty interesting bracket.
And not only they're the 12 in what the bracket would be, they're actually 13 in the top 25, which means Georgia is ahead of them, but Georgia is the first team out. SMU is the second team out in terms of the at-large seeds. If the season were to end today, that's what this is. That's what the CFP tries to do. I did think it was interesting that Miami, without a lot of stellar wins, is ahead of Alabama, ahead of Ole Miss, ahead of Georgia. And that's good for them because if they maintain the course, perhaps that would mean they could get an at-large or just, help them out with seeding or whatever. But that being said, I was surprised that Miami was all of those spots ahead of SMU because their resumes are pretty similar. Like I really feel like you could have put SMU ahead of them.
Yeah. And it's, what I also think is interesting is if you look at, we talked about this on College Football Monday, but Alabama's schedule left, not a ton of resume builders left. They have Mercer, Oklahoma, and Auburn. Miami has, I know they have the finale against Syracuse, but I don't think they have a lot of resume builders left either. No. Notre Dame has that Army game, so there's their resume builder. Ole Miss doesn't have any resume builders left either at this point. So it's like if those 3 teams win out, they're probably stuck in that position. So just looking at the schedule, that's kind of how I'm interpreting that. The rest of it'll play out, right? Like Georgia and Boise State, Tennessee, like Georgia, Tennessee play. So I think that'll play itself out. Boise needs to win out,
Yeah.
whatever. Indiana at 5, I think is really telling because when number 5 loses to number 2, they don't drop back 8 spots.
Probably not.
And
No,
so that I think is interesting.
that's good, really good positioning for Indiana. But I also wonder, Sam, it seems that the loss column is doing a lot of work here. You'll
Yeah.
notice that Miami, despite not looking great really all season and not having a good win, they are ahead of those SEC teams I mentioned. And I think it's because they have one less in the loss column. And so
Mhm.
once Indiana has that extra in the loss column, and you have to evaluate them on an even playing field versus these other one loss teams, they may drop
Yeah.
significantly. But I don't think they're going to drop behind the 2 lost teams, as you kind of indicated there, which we
Right.
thought could happen, but and maybe it will. I don't know. Like if Ole Miss, or sorry, if Georgia beats Tennessee, that's a number 7 win. Like, and Indiana loses to Ohio State, could Georgia move ahead of them,
Right.
even because Georgia's played the toughest schedule in the country?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think they could, like, if you look at the schedule they've played and they beat Tennessee and they beat Georgia Tech, which would also be a good win for
That's
Georgia,
true. That's
they
true.
could skyrocket up these rankings. People who are upset at Georgia being left out right now, look, if Georgia wins out, they're in this playoff and they probably are hosting a game. So calm down with Georgia. What I think is also really interesting about this is Ole Miss's loss against Kentucky. That's to a non-top 25 team. Alabama's loss to Vanderbilt is now against a non-top 25 team. That is a little bit telling. Like those losses are not great losses. So I think you have Notre Dame with an unranked loss, Miami with an unranked loss, Bama, Ole Miss, all with an
No one's
unranked
unranked
loss.
loss is close to Notre Dame's unranked loss.
That is very true. But then if you look at it, compare those resumes to a team like Indiana, whose loss would be at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Compare
Yeah.
it to a team like Georgia, whose losses are at Alabama and at Ole Miss.
Compared
It's
to
just
SMU's loss against BYU.
right. If
You
we're
know,
gonna they're valuing the loss column. You're absolutely correct. And if you look at the loss column, there's a lot of big programs with bad losses.
there are. I would say that anyone with a conference loss, particularly conference losses on the road, are just not bad losses. And that's
That's fair.
that's what Alabama's Zat Vandy is. It's a conference loss on the road. Now it's Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt's pretty solid. So I want to get back to the SMU and Miami thing because I think there's a reason that because I thought because of the extra win against Pitt, because they both beat Duke, they both beat Louisville. And so why would SMU be behind them if they also have the Pitt win? Well, Pitt's not in the top 25 now.
Mm-hmm.
And 2, they came super close to losing to Duke, and Miami covered against Duke by 21 points.
Yeah.
Finally, Miami is 9-1. SMU is only 8-1. And so
Yep.
I think that plays a factor as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like they simply have one more win. They're in a better position right now to compete for the national title. So and then also I think if you were to look at a spread between Miami and SMU on a field in Charlotte, Miami's gonna be favored in that game pretty handily. So I think that is maybe not playing into their thought process, but the consensus is that Miami is a better team than SMU. Like that's not a crazy. One team that we haven't talked about is Texas A&M, who's sitting at 15th.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is an interesting one. They have some good wins. They have good losses, right? I am really, really curious to see if Texas A&M can be a bid stealer with a win against Texas. I
Yeah.
think that is because
It's
that's the wild card of this bracket right now. I think.
so Penn State's the 6, Indiana's the 7 in the bracket, Tennessee the 8. Okay. And BYU is they are in as well. We didn't mention that if you're just
Right.
listening, but BYU is projected to be in the bracket because they are leading the Big 12 and they're the number 6 behind Indiana. So,
Mhm.
all right, let's close that out. We could go on all day, kind of like
Yeah.
talking about scenarios, but that was fun. All right,
Yeah.
depth chart injury update. If you watch the game, you'll know that Tootin and Drones both did play. Neither of them looked right, though, and we will get into that in the recap. As I said, Gabe Williams is okay. He does need surgery. He'll be out for a while, as they said. Obviously, the season's only got a couple weeks left, but we are thinking about his father, who had a stroke and an aneurysm just because he was there. Maybe the stress of the situation. I don't want to speculate too much, but it's just a terrible, terrible story, and I really I'm thinking about them. Mm-hmm. CFB Monday, we did it with Ryan Nanny. It was awesome. Please go and listen to it. I cut up the one VT Corner clip that's on YouTube separately with a little bit of enhanced audio, and the live one, the whole show, is also there. So please give those a listen. Ryan's awesome. He gave some good perspective on the program. We both were talking about our respective struggles following our teams, because he's a Florida grad, and we obviously have some coaching questions. They have coaching questions. So it was a fun conversation in kind of a masochist kind of way.
yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, it was it was good to just three bros crying a little bit together. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, the Pick'em leaders. Sean D08 is in first still, 63-47. NRV Tiger 7 is in second place. I went 8-2 last week, Sam, in the Pick'em. I think that was my best week of the year. I am in 12th place despite missing a week. I am 4 games out of third. 4 wins out of third, I should say. So my percentage is pretty good. I'm pissed. A lot of people have missed weeks. Now, the top guys have not, but it's just one of those things. There's been 11 weeks. There's a bunch of teams with only 100 results or 90 results. But shout out to Sean. You're doing your thing, man. You got a nice little lead right now. I think M Bagel's in there. Kev is in there. So good job, guys. Let's keep it up. Make sure you're hitting those picks every week. And make sure, again, to like the video and subscribe. We say that all the time, but it does help us. Let's get into the game recap. Clemson comes into lane. Like you said, it was a beautiful day. The boys were doing some content over with Juliana and Billy and Pat and all the people. They were having fun. Once the game started, it was a little ugly.
That's been the issue for Virginia Tech lately, hasn't
it? Yeah, everything before the game has been good, and even for a lot of portions of the game until the end. But in this case, it was the first half. No offensive points for either team. There was an interception, a fumble, a turnover on downs, and 2 failed field goal attempts from both teams in that first half. Very sloppy, but the Hokies did have the lead thanks to that return that you mentioned from Quentin Reddish on the field goal block. Shades of Beamer ball. Everyone was pumped. Very cool moment. However, in the second half, Clemson scored on the first 2 drives. Then we had the interception after a big play. They scored on that drive. It was a long one. We scored a touchdown in overtime, but we could not muster enough offense, and we ended up losing 24-14. It was a really disappointing game. Yeah. I think because it was kind of wrapped up in the third quarter, I don't think I was as disappointed, but it sucked.
Yeah, and it's almost like losing it by 10 to Clemson isn't bad.
Shouldn't be
right?
Bad,
like it's not a you don't lose by 10 to Clemson and say the sky is falling. But it was the way they lost was so utterly disappointing. It looked lifeless. It looked like they didn't have any sort of plan coming into that game. Mm-hmm. And I know we mentioned on College Football Monday, but it's did they do any film study of Clemson? Had they watched their other games? It just was so opposite of what we thought we were going to see from Virginia Tech in this game.
And there were a lot of factors at play, and we will get into them right after I play you guys the voicemails.
Cool. We certainly love one-score games. Maybe let's get a healthy running back in and see what we can do in the second half. Let's see how this goes. Go Hokies.
I have a question. Why are we playing hurt players? What happened to Jones' confidence? What are we going to do this offseason? Because something's got to change.
Last week it was fire Marv. Now it's fire Bowen. The fact that we're flip-flopping, I think, means Pry. But I don't think we're ready to fire Pry yet.
Is everyone overreacting? Is everyone underreacting?
If Coach Davis does not become offensive coordinator for next game, I think we riot.
Tootin, 4 carries, 0 yards. No other running backs had carries by the middle of the fourth quarter. How is that possible? I know Malachi was hurt, but we had Coney last week. Like, find something.
First, Gabe Williams, awful way to start his career. Hopefully he's okay.
I'm tired of Fry saying, well, we got to figure it out. We got to find a way to finish. We got to do better. Like, stop gotta, just do it. Do better.
Hey, Pete. Hey, Sam. The only thing left to do now is just get violently high and hope the end is closer than it's ever been.
I love this team, but this year I hate watching this team. But I'm going to keep doing it.
I'm going to hang up and listen to you. Go Hokies.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for the calls. Some good ones there. I didn't get violently high, but I did kind of get violently drunk at the end of that game. I was out at a bar that had 53 beers on tap, including a ton of IPAs. And needless to say, I felt like dog shit on Sunday morning.
Yeah, I mean, Pete, I walked out of that stadium and my thought was, where do they go from here? Because they seem totally out of ideas. I mean,
yeah,
there doesn't seem to be anything left in the tank. And that to me is what is the most troubling about the current situation of Tech football. It looked like it was heading in the right direction. They had righted the ship and they had just gotten a bit unlucky. But man, since middle of the third quarter against Syracuse, this team has looked horrible.
They have. And we'll kind of touch on the bigger picture stuff when we get to our takeaways. But before we get to the offense, the defense, a couple other things. 2 Deep Hokies Under the Influence is brought to you by Jack and Coke. You can see the can right on your screen. 2 legends, 1 can, Jack and Coke. The #1 cocktail in the world is now available in a can in your local grocery and convenience stores. Jack Daniel's Tennessee Whiskey and Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola Zero Sugar. You can find it. Just go to your local liquor store, your beer store, whatever it is. Every state's a little bit different. They've got Jack and Coke in a can. Pick them up, man. It's RTD, ready to drink. There's no mixing. You can't make it too strong. You can't make it too weak. It's just ready. And we might be drinking a lot this off season, next game, maybe during the
tall boy
game.
tonight.
Who knows? Oh, Sam's got the tall boy. Well, while you're having those Jack and Cokes, please drink responsibly, but go pick some up and give it a try. 2 legends, 1 can, Jack and Coke. The story of the game, Sam, I think I could predict it, but what's your story?
I'm deciding between SAT words that I want to use to describe the game. Ineptitude is one that came to mind. The great John Wooden, one of the greatest sports coaches of all time, famously said, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And it did seem like, and I understand the injuries, and we'll talk about that. Kyron is obviously still very beat up, and he's toughing it out there. Bashal Tootin is obviously very, very beat up. Malachi Thomas was unable to dress for the game. But the lack of running the ball identity, to me, against a team that can't stop the run, was borderline negligent,
It was.
to be honest with you. And I will say, one bright spot, credit to the defense. I thought the defense played really, really well.
They did. And I want to talk about the defense after we finish up our notes on the offense, which I'll put it to you this way. This was one of the worst offensive performances of the last decade. If you go by success rate, it was the 4th worst. We've played, I don't know, 120 some odd games in the last decade. This was the 4th worst in terms of an offensive per down success. So it was pretty bad. The 228 yards on offense, 2nd lowest of the Pry era, tied for the 4th lowest point total of the Brent Pry era, and obviously the lowest of the season. There were 12 actual drives in the game. I'm taking out the one where it was the end of the half. So 12 actual drives, only one went over 40 yards, and that was at the very end. So essentially 0. And 5 of the drives, Sam, ended with a play that would be classified as a turnover. So we didn't punt and we didn't score points. So that's a fumble, a field goal miss, an interception, a turnover on downs. And was there another interception?
Schlee had an interception in the 4th quarter.
Yeah. And Drones had one as well.
Yes.
So,
and Drones had a fumble.
And Drones had the fumble. Yeah. So it was 5 turnovers on 12 drives. That's 42% of our drives were turning the ball over,
That's
more or
bad.
less.
That's bad. You talked about the inability to move the ball down the field, and it wasn't just. And this has been the biggest issue, I think, for the Tech offense is when they're bad, they're horrific. They're not moving the ball at all. I mean, it's 3 and out, and they're done. Clemson's average starting field position for this game was their own 38. That's really good. Virginia Tech's average starting field position was their own 18. That's really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was part of the reason this game got away from Virginia Tech in the third quarter specifically was this defense has had their backs against the wall so much this year. And the turnovers in your own side of the 50, Tech had another 2 of those. One of them ended in the blocked field goal, which was an awesome play. The other one ended in a touchdown. So in all 5 of Virginia Tech's losses, they have had a turnover on their own side of the field that led to a touchdown. It's kind of the reality of this season right now.
It's just an
putting the defense in a bad
unbelievable
spot.
stat. Like, I don't know how it keeps happening, but it's the don't turn the ball over in your own end challenge. And we can't seem to do it, man.
Yeah.
Regarding the running game, which you brought up in your story of the game, because my story of the game was just a complete lack of offense, which is just putting it broadly. But Tootin clearly wasn't right. Just the 4 carries, as our caller mentioned, 0 yards. And that was 0 yards for all running backs because no other running backs got carries because Malachi was out, Prelu's been out, and they didn't run Coney. And the fact that we didn't run Jeremiah Coney, I found extremely surprising to the point where I was just like, okay, so he had to be injured too. I was hearing some whispers. Maybe he was banged up. He played 30 snaps in the game. So he was fine enough to play 30 snaps in the game. And Tootin, even if he was fully healthy, why would you not be giving Coney some carries? Like, even if Tootin's 100%, you're still going to give him a couple carries because Malachi's not healthy.
Yeah, I don't.
He wasn't healthy, and you didn't run him at all. He averaged over 10 yards a carry against Syracuse. He's averaging 7.7 yards a carry on the season, and you chose to run him 0 times. For anyone saying that the fumble is why we're not playing him, first of all, Tootin fumbled in a critical moment in the BC game. We don't stop running him. Drones has fumbled so many times and turned it over at least 3 times with fumbles this year. So a good hat on the ball against Syracuse on Coney is the reason you're not going to play him? No, that's not what it was. They didn't play him because of the fumble. They didn't play him because they don't have a clue. They can't find a clue. They wouldn't know a clue if it bit them in the ass. And I am so sick of this shit. Like, the best thing we do all year is run the ball with the running back. And you have a decent running back available playing in the game. Yeah. And you didn't use him at all. Zero
and
yards.
They had him there as a decoy pretty much. And it became very obvious after the second drive.
You had Tootin in there as a decoy, drive. You're saying.
Yeah, Tootin was there as a decoy the first drive. Never looked like he was going to get the ball. They ran a quick screen. They ran a draw play, and then they had an incomplete pass. He's not in there for the second drive and comes back in. And it's like, okay, you've had your 2 first drives. You haven't given the ball to your best player. That best player's probably not doing anything. Like, it was so blatantly obvious that he was not available. And then later in the game, he does get a carry, comes up, hobbling a bit. He needed to get subbed out. He was walking to the sidelines to get subbed out. Coney was trying to come into the game, and the coaches are pulling Coney back to the sidelines. So Tootin has to stay in the game for another play. It's an incomplete pass. Tech punts the ball. The next drive, guess who's out there? Bashal Tootin. And Bashal Tootin gets a carry. He jukes 2 guys out of their socks, gets tackled, and is down injured again. It is just a complete and utter ineptitude with game management.
And the only reason he's hurt now, Sam, is because they left him in too long against Georgia Tech. And so, like, we had that game locked up, and we've been trying to save Tootin kind of in it. Like, we've been giving him fewer carries, and we've been mad about it earlier in the year. And then when we have a game in hand, you run him. He gets hurt against Georgia Tech. He can't go the next game. Coney actually performs well. You get to this game, and you decide, well, he's still banged up, and he clearly wants to be out there, and I get that. But you are the coaches. You can see he's been ineffective. You have a guy who's ran for 10 yards a carry against Syracuse, and like I said, nearly 8 on the year. Why are you not giving them the ball? And that's the tough part about this. You have to protect these guys from themselves. All of that being said about the coaching malpractice with regard to the running game with the running backs, if Drones was healthy, I still think we might have had a chance in this game because his ability to run, like he didn't have it against Georgia Tech. He didn't have it here. But when he does have it, he can put the team on his back, and he just wasn't able to do that. And so then the question becomes, should we have brought Schlee in earlier? Should we have started Schlee?
Yeah, that is the question because Drones is clearly still dealing with an injury. I mean, you can see it when he's running. You can see it when he throws. He doesn't have that lower body power. Doesn't have the speed, scrambling. He's clearly injured. And I think it is affecting his throwing a lot more than people may be thinking. And so they made the switch when the game was, I wouldn't say out of hand, but they made the switch at the very last minute. And Schlee came in there and he was firing away, running around like a crazy person, extending plays. Looked pretty good. His wide receivers sure didn't help him. I think he was 7 of 17, but 3 of his incompletions were drops. And I'm pretty sure all of them would have been for first downs.
And that's the other piece of this game is because the receivers did not help either quarterback.
Awful. Couldn't get open, couldn't catch the ball.
And we say that on a night where Felton had 6 catches for 68 yards, but he also had a drop or two. And other guys had a drop or two.
Yeah.
And it's just, your 2 best guys are banged up. Could you step up to the plate and not drop the ball? And it's easy for me to say as a guy who's not playing out there, but it's just frustrating that like in this moment, in a game where like this is a pretty big deal. This could have been the best win for Pry, could have been the best win for this staff, and they just kind of flubbed it. Like they didn't. Maybe you should have decided earlier in the week, like we can't risk this injured or not injured thing. Like we need to start Schlee. We need to give him all the reps in practice. We need to make sure he's ready because that might have been able to make a difference.
Yeah, it might have. And I mean, you looked at how they at least, I know Clemson's playing a bit prevent. We're throwing the ball crazy. But like, dude, at least he's full go. Like it's not Kyron's fault that he's hurt, right? And you putting him out there when he's not at 100% is kind of a disservice to him. It's a disservice to the team.
There's so many reasons it's a disservice because it takes away the thing that makes him good.
Yes.
Like he is not an efficient passer of the football, and that is okay. It doesn't mean he's not a good college quarterback. He is a good college quarterback because of what he can do breaking the defense down with his legs. And if you take that away from him, you are leaving him hanging out to dry.
Yeah. Yeah, and I thought Schlee looked he looked positive, he looked confident, he looked good when he played. I think Pete Drones isn't practicing this week. Brent Pry said that this evening. Neither is Bashal Tuden. They'll try to revamp them up Sunday and see what happens, but they certainly aren't committing to them being 100% by Sunday. I don't know, man. I feel like if you want to make a bowl game, you got to start Colin Schlee and Durham.
You got to start healthy players.
Yeah. Whoever they are. Like,
yeah.
I think the running back room sucks though right now, dude. Because
I'm so annoyed that Prelude. Not annoyed. I'm just. It sucks for PJ. It sucks for the team that PJ got hurt because he would be ripping off runs right now. And like the Syracuse game was primed for guys to have good rushing game. Like if Tuten was healthy, he would have ran for 200 yards against Syracuse because Malachi and Coney did great. And in this game against that Clemson defense, which was missing 2 of its starting defensive tackles and a banged up linebacker unit, to put this out there was really, really disappointing. This was an opportunity, as we said on the preview, and the coaches either didn't realize it or every calculated thought they had failed. And I think that's the second part of that is what was true.
It's like getting to a point where part of our issue this season has been if it's not the offense causing the issues, it's the defense causing the issues, right? It's a different story every game.
That was what one of the callers said. It's either Bowen or it's Marv.
Yeah. And last week it was Marv in the fourth quarter. Like his defense couldn't get a stop. Syracuse scored on 5 of their last 6 possessions. This one, Marv's guys played great, but Winside couldn't move the ball. And it's like, okay, guys, this is not looking good. Like, I don't know how you fix this, to be honest with you. I don't know, because I'll tell you, Pete, watching that game, not a single player in white and orange looked that much bigger, faster, stronger than anybody who was in maroon.
No, not at all.
I mean, athleticism and size was not an issue on Saturday.
It came down to a handful of plays, including the one where Klubnik escaped and threw the ball for the touchdown, which was excruciating because we had already seen that against Miami with Cam Ward. Both of which kind of were the back-breaking plays of those 2 games. So that's fun. But on top of the poor coaching stuff, the execution was bad too. Like, I'm not going to let the players completely off the hook. I'll always blame the coaches first, but we were 2 of 14 on third down. We talked about the drops. The trick play, which I guess was a combination of coaching and execution, but like in that spot, when you have 1st and 10 from the 28, I realize it's Clemson and you got to take shots. I don't have a huge issue with the trick play call in that moment, although you were up 7 and you could have just kicked a field goal if you played safe and been up 10. Instead, they ran a really kind of funky trick play, and it still came close to working. Like, if 1 second here, 1 second there, but the execution was bad.
Yeah, it was bad. I know Billy Ray put out a tweet of him doing some film study of the game and was like, this was messed up at every single level. And we talked about that pregame too. Like, they've started to rely a lot on these trick plays. It's going to come to bite you in the butt against better athletic teams. And it did in this one. Felton was wide open down the field too.
I know.
But it was, which is so excruciating because it's a clear out route and he's never looking at Felton down there. Like, he's supposed to throw it back to Kyron and Kyron runs.
You're saying that Aiden could have thrown it to Felton.
He could have, but that was never the play. Like, I don't think that was ever an option for him.
And he might not have the arm to get it down there. Like,
he was pretty far. It was a clear out route. It was a bad call in that spot.
Let's talk a little bit about the defense, because they played really strong in the first half. It was the 5th straight game that the defense didn't give up a first half touchdown. Now, let's not talk about the second halves or third quarter specifically, but they played great in the beginning of that game. Maffa had 128, but like, I still felt like that was pretty solid considering what our run defense has been.
Yeah. Maffa's a weird running back. He's so big and so strong, but the dude just runs out of bounds every play. He refuses to get tackled. I mean, he'll break 3 or 4 tackles and run out of bounds for a gain of 3 yards. But I think Tech did a pretty good job on him. I think they did well with Klubnik. Under 50% completion percentage. The only big plays they had in the passing game were busted coverages, really.
And the busted sack and busted coverages. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was that one play that they were running. Didn't they run like one similar play again and again?
It's just, the middle of the field on Virginia Tech's defense is an issue. They ran pretty much the same thing Clemson ran, just a simple RPO with a 10-yard slant route. And over again,
you're saying the same thing as Syracuse ran. Yeah.
Yep. It's the same play. Yep.
I would say Keontae Jenkins continues his strong play. This is the 3rd game in a row where he was just balling out. 3 TFL, 2 pass breakups, a forced fumble. He's now 2nd on the team in TFL with 7 behind APR. APR himself had a great game. Tied for the national lead in sacks yet again, 14.5 tackles for loss. I know most of those are sacks, but like those are some high totals, man. He tied his TFL total from last year in this past game. So he might have 3 more games to rack up some more.
I think the defensive front 7 played pretty well in this game. Considering the challenge that they had and considering the fact that they were on the field for, gosh, what is it? I'm pulling up the stats now for time of possession.
34?
But almost 37 minutes of possession for Clemson. So, I mean, that is that's a lot. That's flipped. Because you want to know why they had so much? Do you know what Virginia Tech's 3rd down rate is over the last 3 games?
Not over the last 3 games. This past game was really bad.
9 of 40.
Oh God, that's so
9
bad.
of 40.
And we won one of those games.
And you won one of those games. So that is like anybody
we
who
should have won 2 of those games.
I tweeted out some stats today.
So what you're trying to
say?
you're trying to say, don't hold the defense accountable for this thing, because if the offense had played even just a little bit better, the defense might have been able to hold up.
Two of the last 3 games, Tech has held the opposing team under the Ferentz line, under 25 points. And like, you should be able to, like in modern college football with spread offenses, you should be able to score 4 touchdowns.
If you hold Clemson under 25 in your own house, you should be able to win the game, or at least have an opportunity
with a special teams touchdown.
And we were not even close to having an opportunity to win that game.
Nope.
Not once the second half started, I should say. And so it's, gosh, man, because the offense, going into Syracuse, I would have said the offense has had the better season.
Mm-hmm.
I probably would have said that. Now, you look at the stats today, and you kind of did a deep dive on this. The defense has played remarkably well.
Yeah. So for the defense this season, and these numbers I'm about to read off are not opponent adjusted, but it's not opponent adjusted for anybody in the country. They are number 36 in expected points added per pass, number 44 in expected points added per rush, number 30 in early down, so that's first and second down, expected points added per play, number 29 in net EPA per drive, and number 38 in defensive dropback success rate. Good, not great, not elite, but pretty darn good.
That's a top 40 defense on average. Like, that's a mid 30-ish defense.
Yes.
Is what you're saying statistically.
Number 28th in the country in adjusted EPA per play. So that's adjusted for the strength of the opposing offense. Number 28 in the country.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And then what has been so promising about this defense is 2022, the first year, they finished number 82 in that metric. In 2023, they finished number 58 in that metric. And now, towards the end of this season, they're sitting at number 28. That's a lot of really positive progression on the defensive side of the ball. And especially considering that Virginia Tech hasn't recruited at a super elite level. A lot of the guys that are studs on the defense, Jenkins, Strong, Jaden Keller,
APR,
Wilfred
Woodson.
Panay, APR, they have been developed in this defense to get to this point. And so I'm looking at the trajectory of the Virginia Tech defense, and I'm also considering the positions that they have been put in by the offense. Man, it's a bummer that they've had a couple of bad drives in the fourth quarter against Vanderbilt and Syracuse and Miami, because holy crap, like, they're good defense. They're really good defense.
Yeah, and that's what's tough about analytics, right? And these advanced analytics. And I would never push back on analytics are worthless, right? Like, that's like some of the old school guys will do. But there is something to be said for not being able to get it done in the clutch.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it is a lot of the same issues that Justin Hamilton had when he was a young defensive coordinator, where end of game, how do you manage that as a defensive coordinator? Do you go aggressive? Do you just go in a shell? And I think Justin Hamilton kind of just would go into a deep shell and get burned a lot. I mean, I'm thinking back to the Syracuse game.
The Liberty off coverage.
Oh my God. The Georgia Tech. I mean, if you look back to the early Chris Marv, like, that was very similar to the Georgia Tech comeback that they had. The Syracuse comeback they had, right? You couldn't stop the same play. That feels to me, though, so much more fixable than what we're seeing on the offensive side of the ball.
It does. And it speaks to having a defensive head coach. It's nice to hear some of that, Sam, because right now there's a lot of doom and gloom, and it is nice to hear some of the positivity in terms of just taking steps forward every year. And we have just come up short on the margins this year so much. Let's give our takeaways. And then I do want to ask you on that note about the identity of our defense, about the identity of our offense. And since we're on a bye week,
Mhm.
a little bit of time to reflect after we give our takeaways on those two questions. But I thought this was just terribly disappointing. That's probably the third or fourth time I said that, but this was such a vulnerable Clemson team. You have them at home. You've got a lead at the half. And I know we had injuries, but so did Clemson. And the second half wasn't competitive.
No, wasn't competitive at all. And I agree with you. It felt like the way that they botched the end of that second quarter was so on brand and so characteristic. You knew it wasn't going to be different. They had the opportunity to go up 2 scores and then reassess, get something together for the second half. Unable to do it.
The lack of adjustments, man. And I'm not gonna rag on the lack of identity too much because the guys are banged up. And so forget about the identity because we couldn't do all the things we wanted to do. I still think we could have ran the ball. Obviously, I've already done that rant.
Do you have an offensive identity, or do you just your offensive identity can't just be, we give the ball to our best player?
I know.
Like, I think it is at some point. Your identity is your system. And I feel like right now they don't really know what they're good at.
No.
They know who is good.
Kind of.
Does that make sense, or is that just stupid?
No, I think it makes sense, but I also take issue with the second part of it because I will knock the lack of a decent plan. So forget identity for this game because of the injuries, because our quarterback is hurt. But like the lack of a decent plan and contingencies in place when you need to pivot and you don't pivot fast enough. The failure to adjust again and again and again throughout the season. The staff just like the joke of pride gets it. Like the staff don't get it. Like they just cannot figure out how to adjust quickly. Like the third quarter thing is so damning. If you look at the point differentials, it's plus 29 in the first, plus 37 in the second, minus 27 in the third, which that was a correction from Andy Bitter. He had minus 41, but it's actually minus 27. And then plus 51 in the fourth. That the third quarter is like, we are getting crushed.
Yeah. And I can only think of one third quarter that's been good. I think Marshall was a good third quarter.
Decent. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
because we ran the ball every play for an entire drive. Yeah.
ODU.
We turned it on really in the fourth for ODU, though, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, you were actually you are right because ODU scored.
Because I'm wondering how we're plus 51 in the fourth. I think a lot of it's from ODU.
From Marshall, Rutgers, you outscored them like 16-3 in the fourth. BC, you did like that third quarter is so pivotal because it is kind of just the game kind of restarts and the crowd has to be kind of like, there's no Enter Sandman, there's no Let's Go Hokies. Like the crowd has to be like re-energized.
They're coming back to their seats from getting a hot dog or a beer.
And it's pretty damning. And it's one of those that I don't know. Again, I don't know how that gets better. It's like the clock management. It's like the game prep. It's like the inability to see your best players are in practice. I don't know how it gets better.
It doesn't get better without changes.
Yeah.
With like overhauls in certain aspects of the team. And that will lead me to my final takeaway. And you kind of talked a little bit about this on Monday, but this staff doesn't seem to know how to evaluate their players on a week-to-week basis to know what they have and what they're best at. And that's why I was kind of smiling when you made that one point because they don't know how to game plan because they don't know how to figure out what they're good at. Like, how do you not see what every fan sees when we're just like, please run the ball? We are begging you to run the ball. And it seems like they've ran the ball against their will this year as a staff because week to week, we do not know what we're going to see. And that's why we're inconsistent every week. Sometimes their game plans work. Most of the time they don't. And rarely, if ever, do they work for an entire game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the idea of dominating game for 60 minutes is out the window. It is totally, totally out the window, whether that's from strategy or player execution. Because, right, like I think you can go to that Boston College game. That was purely player execution, right? You had 2 fumbles and an interception. Like that's on the players. You need players to play 60 minutes. You need coaches to coach 60 minutes.
I think I'll save the question about our next two opponents and how you feel about them for the end. Let's take a second to talk about our sponsor and take a beer break. The Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence podcast is brought to you by Roback. Y'all know Roback. Roback is the performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. They put out the new drop in the summer. The polos are gorgeous. I would say I love their polos, man, and I could probably wear two different sizes depending on what kind of style I was going for. Like the ones I have, they fit great and they're loose and they're cool. But if I wanted a more sleek look, maybe I could size down. And that's the thing about Roback. I'd say if you're worried about being in between sizes, size down. And
Agreed.
you'll have like a little bit of a more fitted look. But if you want more comfort, size up if you're kind of questioning it.
Yeah, and it's just nice. It's like a really good combination of a lightweight, sweat wicking, cool in the summer, but a heavier material that fits nice. It looks nice. It doesn't look like you're wearing an athletic shirt or something like that. It looks like you're dressed to impress.
I wore it to a party at my sister's house last weekend, my Commonwealth Roback, and I got so many compliments, like it was crazy. Like
It's it's big.
I'm not even bullshitting. Like people were like, "Man, that's a nice looking shirt. Is that a Virginia Tech shirt?" I'm like, "Well, it kind of is.
It's an icebreaker.
It's low key." But anyway, use code 2DeepVT to get 20% off your order on Roback. Roback Crave Activity. I was wondering, Sam, with the Roback, do you wear an undershirt? Do you wear like a V-neck or with polos in general?
I'm a constant V-neck undershirt guy.
Yeah, I wear. If I want to protect the shirt, like, and my Commonwealth is white, so I'm trying to like not get the sweat stains, and I will wear an undershirt. If I've got a black polo, not always, or just like one that kind of fits a little bit more fitted, I won't wear an undershirt.
I'm a everyday at work, all the time V-neck undershirt. That's the way to go.
Understood. I like this conversation. All right. Tell me what you're drinking over there.
I am, and you might have seen, if you're on YouTube, you've seen some of my facial reactions. This is a new beer. This is the TGIF. Thank God it's fall. It's from Evil Twin Brewing in New York City. It says New York City, but I believe the main brewery is in New Hartford, Connecticut. It is a really cool can. It looks like a Bon Iver album cover. Like that's just the vibe I'm getting. Maybe Folklore, Taylor Swift, but it's literally just like autumn colored trees on a white. It
looks like a wooded glen.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. Very simplistic can. This is a IPA, double dry hopped with Mosaic, 6.5%. It is absolutely bomb.
Ooh.
This is one of my favorites I've had on this that I've tried and had on this show.
What are you giving it for your rating?
I'm giving it
on Untapped right now.
I'm giving it a 4.5.
Oh, sugar. That's high.
Yeah. This is one of the best beers I've had on this show.
So do you want to guess what its global rating is?
I guess I got 3.8, 3.9.
It's 3.84. But that's pretty good. I mean,
that's pretty good for
a single IPA. That's pretty good because a lot of the doubles get higher ratings.
It is a really, really good balance of sweet and hoppy. Like it is perfect. So if you are, I got this at Total Wine, because it's obviously not a local beer. It's not super highly distributed, so you'd probably have to go to a store like that or maybe a beer specialty store to get it. But I've heard of Evil Twin and I've heard good things about them. So if you're into that, check it out. Evil Twin Brewing, New York City. The TGIF, thank God it's fall.
I always mix up Evil Twin and Evil Genius, but Evil Genius is really more of a thing where I am because I think they're out of the Philadelphia area. And they make really good beer too. But I've definitely heard of Evil Twin. It's a good brewery. I am drinking the Stone FML, which I've had on the show before, but the FML just felt right for the kind of season we're having. And it's actually called the Fear Movie Lions, which I don't know if that has something to do with Friday Night Lights or something, but
would it be the Warner? No, it's not Warner Brothers. What's the one with the movie and the lion roars at the beginning of the movies?
Is that MGM?
It's MGM. Thank you.
Inspired by the positive impact of this system, we decided to name this IPA after a 3-meter square in the brewery where it was created. I don't
understand what that
that's
means.
not really giving me any more clarity, but I was actually thinking about Friday Night Lights today, Sam, because I've been pondering t-shirt ideas for 2D, and we all know the phrase clear eyes, full hearts can't lose. What if there was something about like clear takes, full beers can't lose?
Clear takes, full beers can't lose. Maybe. Yeah, I can see it.
It's not terrible. The other idea is that you kind of like you use the two, like it's two legends, one can kind of thing, but it's like two something, too deep.
Yeah. No, we can workshop this. We can workshop this.
Okay.
A couple more beers and we'll have great ideas.
Now we're just spitballing, but all right. I want to talk about our identity, Sam. And if you were the czar of Virginia Tech football, and that's a term that Pate likes to use, I think, or maybe it's Godfrey, I can't remember, but you're in charge of Virginia Tech football. If it were up to you, what would our offensive identity be? And this can be described in any way.
Yeah, I think it is actually not super far off from what we have seen from Tyler Bowen. And that's going to shock some people. But I look at Virginia Tech's never going to have 5-star quarterback, track star wide receivers, bunch of dudes on offensive line. Like, it's just not going to happen, right? We're not going to have Oregon's offense, right? We're, Jameson Williams and walking through that door in Merriman, right? So you have to do things that get the defense on their heels a bit to give your athletes a step up. A lot of motion and a lot of play action. Tyler Bowen does those things. Virginia Tech has motion on pretty much every single play. Virginia Tech's best passing is through the play action. I really like those aspects of the offense. I think one of the main issues is the inability to develop a pocket passer and relying a lot on the quarterback being a runner. I think it is when
you're saying relying too much on that.
Yeah, I think that is in a way has held back Virginia Tech's quarterback development a bit, because there are so many times these guys are practicing, read option running plays or trying to scramble around, or we're trying to make everything be a wide open pass. And that's not the reality of football. You're going to have to make contested catches. You have to make tight throws. And the issues that we've seen from Grant Wells and Kyron Drones are actually pretty similar. Inability to throw into tight windows, inability to see the field, inability to make really good checks at the line. It just feels like systemically this offense is not built to develop a passer. It's really only meant to develop a guy who can run the football and make the one read to the open wide receiver.
I think that they wanted to make him a passer this year, Sam, and it didn't take.
No, it did not take. It did not take. Oh boy, it got worse. I mean, it got like Pete. It got
the passer.
I don't want to be mean, but it got worse.
The passer rating now, and I think partially is he's not being helped out by the last game and the injury and whatever, but it's worse than last year.
Yeah,
and my thing with the identity is like I always want to have a run first team at Virginia Tech because of some of the stuff you mentioned. Because you can't get into these shootout wars being at Virginia Tech. We're always going to have, whether we get back to what we were in the 90s or not, you're not always going to have the dudes that a Georgia and Alabama do. You're going to have to grind the clock, be physical, and make plays on play action, RPO, off of that running game. But I also think Virginia Tech, if I have my druthers, like it's a mobile QB. It's not a running QB, and there is a difference.
I'd agree with you there.
Think Tyrod as opposed to like a Kyron Drones or a Quincy Patterson type,
right.
Where the passing game is lacking. And it took Brian Randall a little while. It took Tyrod a little while to be good at a passing game. But they got there eventually. And that, in a perfect world, is what we do, is run the ball, RPO, play action. You have some dudes on the outside, and that's the other thing. You need dudes on the outside to be successful in college football. You just do,
Mhm.
especially now. But we're never going to have probably as deep of a receiving core as we had this year. And even that we weren't able to utilize. So you
Yeah.
need a couple of really special athletes. Think Andre Davis on the outside. You need a mobile quarterback. You need a running back who's a stud, or two running backs that you can count on. And that's what Virginia Tech should be. That's
Yeah.
what they should be based on what we can attain in recruiting and what like the mentality of the fan base probably wants.
Yeah.
We're not going to be a spread team.
No, and think about it from a investment standpoint, right? Because the reality is, Pete, like you have to invest in these players and you have a finite amount of money and you need to spend it somewhere. Where do you spend it? Well, if you're not going to be a passing team, if you're not going to throw the ball 40 times a game, you probably don't need to pay for 5 wide receivers.
You don't.
You probably need to pay for 5 offensive linemen, though. And it's like,
or develop offensive linemen well.
Yeah, and I think that is where
develop them for what you want to do, which is
like if you're going to run this spread offense, like I think the ideal offensive scheme, if you wanted to put a label on it for Virginia Tech, would be kind of like what Chadwell ran at Coastal Carolina and what he's running at Liberty, like a true spread option, like back to the Oregon days, where it's you run the ball a lot, a ton of motion, use speed guys.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to play action. Like that's how you're going to move the football consistently.
It's like a fancy service academy offense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look at actually like, this is a go Army beat Navy household, but look at what Navy is doing on offense this year. They are going into shotgun a bit more. And I'm not saying we need to run the wing T or the triple option or something, or even that we need to do what Vanderbilt is doing, which is starting to get shut down, by the way, with a few weeks of film out there. But there are just too many windows of time where this team goes away from what has been proven to work time and time again. And that's unacceptable, I think, at this point.
And I think we'll both be in agreement that regardless of what identity we want, more than anything else, we want a coach and an OC who is going to adjust to the strengths of the roster. And that's something that Josh Heupel has done really well, both offensively and defensively, figuring out, I don't have Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt. I'm going to do it this way. And you decide, let's run the ball so we can save our defense because our defense is really good. Complementary football. Like Josh Heupel is doing it better than just about anyone else right now.
Yeah. I'd agree. And I think it's one of those things where, again, if you haven't figured it out by now, when are you going to figure it out? Like, I don't think better players helps you figure that out.
If you watch Bashal Tuden all of last year and in camp and all through the winter workouts, and you come into Vanderbilt and you're like, you know what, we should pass the shit out of the ball. You don't know what you're doing.
No.
You just don't. I'm sorry. Like, he is elite. And you decided, we can't really pass block, but let's do a passing offense. Let's do that. But anyway, let's go to defense, Sam. If you could change, I'm sorry, would you change any of our traditional defensive philosophies? Or like, how would you run your defense?
I think the defense Tech has now is defense to me is so much more mentality based. And I think this defense actually plays with a pretty good mentality. They play fast. They play strong. They don't blitz as much as we saw with Bud Foster. I think that's the biggest difference. Obviously, so Virginia Tech now is running a much more of a 4-3-4 than the 4-2-5 that Bud Foster made so famous. Keonta's more. You have guys that third linebacker is much more of a linebacker than a safety, whereas with Bud Foster is much more of a safety, right? Think Chamari Connor.
The whip you're saying was
the whip
safety.
Yeah, whip was more of a safety. The star outside is a little more linebacker this year. I do think they get themselves in trouble sometimes by the linebackers seem to get very spread out and the middle of the field is wide ass open. time and time again. Like
Yeah, we've
it was,
seen that a couple times.
It was
this year.
open up the middle against Vanderbilt. It was open up the middle against Miami. It was open against Syracuse. It was open against Rutgers. Like Rutgers ran the same play over and over again. And Mike Holmes, the wonderful football film analyst for Sons of Saturday, went over it and was like, dude, our guys don't have a shot to make the play because they're following their cues. And Rutgers basically has figured out 2 years in a row what Virginia Tech's cues are and how to stop it. Like poor Caleb Woodson had to sprint 25 yards to get in position and against that one play. And I think there are just some issues there with how they are running the cues of the linebackers that are not putting them in the best position to be able to defend the play.
Are you like the way you feel about defense? What do you like better, 4-3 or 3-4?
Ooh, personally, I like a 3-3-5. I think a 3-3-5 is kind of nasty, but I think that is also more for playing a pass-heavy opponent.
Yes, absolutely.
And Tech doesn't play a ton of those.
I think
they're not playing in the old Big 12.
I'd always want 4 linemen. I think I always want 4 guys closer to the quarterback is the way I would prefer to run my defense. And that's how we have run our defense. Yeah. And whether it's a 4-2-5 or a 4-3-4, however you want to classify it, the aggressive style that Tech has tended to run historically is what I like more blitzing, taking chances. That's what Jim Johnson ran for the Eagles when we had Donovan McNabb, and he was a legendary defensive coordinator. Maybe it's just what I like, but I think that intimidation factor of having an aggressive defense, I think does more than even what it does in the moment. It can make the quarterback scared.
Yeah, and I think also what you've seen is the lack of blitzing from the Brent Pry defense. There's also the lack of the run blitz, and a run blitz is pretty much when you're blitzing kind of more up the middle to defend the run and into those gaps than you are blitzing from the outside to try to rush the quarterback. Virginia Tech's done great rushing the quarterback without all of those blitzes, right? One of the best in the ACC 2 years running now.
It helps
the issue
when you've
is
got a guy like APR.
Yeah, it does. They're not stopping the run as consistently. And I think one of the reasons is because they aren't as aggressive right off the snap with the linebackers. And that is causing some of the issues in the run game. I think it's causing some of the issues in the RPO game specifically, which has been hit 2 times now, where the linebackers feels like they're kind of caught in no man's land right now.
And you know what's crazy though? The last few weeks, I feel like the linebackers have come such a long way. And with better schematics, play in and play out, I think this linebacker unit's pretty phenomenal. They could be really freaking good with the right alignment and the right cues every play. We've got Keontae Jenkins is playing out of his mind right now.
Yeah.
And Caleb Woodson is really good, and Brumfield has his moments, and it's Kelly Lawson has been playing. He played a lot at the beginning of the last game. We have guys, dude. I just feel like I know we kind of have. We talked about Bowen. We've talked about Marv, and Marv is definitely. I wouldn't have said this a week ago, but he might be on more solid footing than Bowen. But if you replace our coordinators with some of the best in the game, we would be ridiculous. We would just absolutely. And I know that's an easy thing to say, but not every team has the dudes to be ridiculous. I think we do.
Yeah, I don't think at any point this season it's been the talent level's a little low, or we don't look fast out there, or we look undersized. I don't think there's been a game this year that Tech has looked like that. Maybe some on the I think there have been points where the Tech offensive line, you look at it and you're like, oh, they're just a step slower than they need to be. But I haven't seen it at the other positions.
Here's a fun question.
Is it a fun question? Or
what's the best staff right now in college football? I have my thought, but what's the best staff? Head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, whatever.
I would say probably Texas or Oregon.
I was going to say Oregon.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a true Dan Lanning believer, but watching some of the stuff they've done this year, they seem so locked in. So let's just use them as an example. Right. You take Oregon staff, you give them our roster, our schedule. What's the record?
At this point, probably like you probably have one loss, 2 losses, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's at worst 8-2. At worst.
Oh yeah, at worst. I mean, there's some things like one of the reasons Dan Lanning looks so good this year because his team is stacked.
I know.
That's like Steve Sarkisian is an offensive genius. He also has the best offensive players every single year. He had him at Bama and he has him at Texas now. So like that's part of it. But I would also say you look at how efficient and drilled and like watch Oregon. I don't know how many people have watched Oregon play. They've only had one really big like primetime game. They don't make mistakes. They don't have penalties. They don't have pre-snap issues.
They're doing penalties on purpose.
They barely have
gamesmanship because they're so locked in.
They barely have incomplete passes.
They don't.
I mean,
Dylan Gabriel doesn't throw incomplete passes.
It's a machine. And like Texas, they had the awful game against Georgia. But if you look at their creativity on offense and you look at, you know, how they're spreading the ball around, how they're still running the football, defensively, they're probably the top defense in the country. I have some net statistics up here that I'm going to toggle to
right,
defensive. They are the number 1 defense in the country in adjusted EPA.
Here's another one. You take what Kirk Cignetti was able to do in year 1 with a ton of new pieces. He comes over to Tech this past summer. What's our record with Kirk Cignetti?
Like, how many games have we played?
We played 10 games.
Yeah, 11-0.
So that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's just like, and people know this, and not every team can have Dan Lanning, and not every team can have a first-year head coach who's lighting it up. But I'll be damned if we should be 5-5 for Christ's sake.
5-5 is shocking. It's like this team has had to try to get to 5-5, and it really does suck. I do think, Pete, let's tell both sides of the story. There is a bit of unlucky going on here in some of these games.
There are.
And this schedule is much tougher than we thought it was going to be in August. You know, you look at, we haven't played Duke yet, but Duke has improved. Vanderbilt's obviously very different. I think Tech got Rutgers at like seemingly the only week that Rutgers has been healthy all year. Miami is obviously a national title contender. You know, Syracuse much improved year over year under Fran Brown.
And the other thing is, Sam, if we're healthy the last 2 weeks, we probably have 2 more wins.
At least one more win.
Probably at least. You would like to think with a fully healthy Drones and a fully healthy Tootin, we could have won Syracuse or Clemson. You would like to think that.
Sure. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think you could also say with better clock management, you probably beat Miami, and you probably you could have beaten Syracuse off clock management.
You could beat Syracuse with the exact same guys you had if you had better clock management.
No, I think it's the point is proven. It's not a Jimmy's and Joe's issue.
It's not.
I mean, that's not up for debate.
Okay, so how are you feeling about our next 2 opponents, Duke and UVA?
Okay. I don't think they're very good. Like, I don't think Duke, a lot of Duke's defensive numbers are a bit inflated by who they played in the non-conference to start the year, right? Like they're
7-3, just so you know.
They're 7-3. They racked up a lot of defensive stats against Northwestern when Northwestern had a quarterback who they since moved on from. With I think they played Elon. They've racked up some stats there. Offensively, they're not good. They're just straight up bad. They do run a lot of RPO stuff though, and Virginia Tech will need to be ready for that, right? The RPO slant down the middle to like Pancall's their top wide receiver. They're going to run that pretty much every play, and you got to be ready to stop it. So that is a bit of a worry.
And you're going to be there for prime time.
Yeah, because the stupid game is at 8:00, so I have to drive from Durham back to Richmond for Thanksgiving the next day.
You're going to celebrate Pat Finn's 30th birthday.
I can't think of a better place to celebrate it than Durham, North Carolina.
Hell yeah, man. Where else would you want to turn 30?
Either other point in the triangle would be better.
Speaking of which, I think I'm going to Raleigh Martin Luther King Day weekend.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love the city of Raleigh.
I've never been there.
Cool city. You'll enjoy it.
Nice.
And then UVA, like they don't look very good. I think they did play well against Pitt, especially defensively. They think they've picked it up here towards the second half of the year, but offensively, it's the same story, right? They're not good on the line of scrimmage on either side of the ball.
Right.
There's no one who really scares you that much on that team. But dude, the way Tech's playing this year, who knows what's going to show up on that Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, the game in Wallace Wade, that's typically been a Hokie home field advantage.
Mhm.
And Malik Murphy doesn't impress me. You got, like, a lot of the guys on our chat with us are like, Duke stinks. But I thought they were going to lose to NC State last week, and they didn't. And they are absolutely a team who could beat us. Like, we can beat anybody, we can lose to anybody on our schedule. And I'm thinking with 2 weeks, we'll be ready to go, and we should be able to win that game. But if for some reason we lose that game, and we've got bowl eligibility on the line against UVA, who also may have bowl eligibility on the line when they take on us in Lane for the first time in many years with fans, it's going to be an anxiety bowl.
Guess that spread. I'm going to guess like pretty close to a pick 'em. Duke minus 1.5, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Tech plus 1.5, like pretty close to a pick 'em game. I'm going to guess for Duke.
I think we'll be minus 2.5.
I could see that. Yep, that makes sense. Duke's offensive success rate in rushing the ball, number 130 in the country.
That's good. That is a good matchup.
It's good.
Okay, so let's do picks. Let's talk picks.
Okay.
And then let's get it the hell out of here because we got a bye week, buddy.
Yeah.
UVA at Notre Dame. Notre Dame minus 23.5. Had to put this on the list because it's in the pick'em and they're playing UVA. So what do you got on Notre Dame minus 23.5?
Yeah, give me Notre Dame. The way that defense is playing is great. They need style points right now, so I think they might be in a situation where like they're up 21, 5 left in the fourth, and like Riley Leonard is still in the game and they score. I think you get that.
Yeah. UVA just got their big win. I want to take Notre Dame. I there is something about UVA and Notre Dame though where I feel like they could cover, but I'm going to take Notre Dame. Mizzou at South Carolina. South Carolina 13.5 point favorites. That's a very big spread for two teams. Well, South Carolina is higher in the standings. They're in the rankings. South Carolina is too, I guess. So who do you got in this game? So South Carolina minus 13.5. That seems crazy.
Yeah, that's too many points. Missouri hasn't been good, but they're not terrible. Doesn't look like Brady Cook will play. I don't still questionable. So I just think that's too many points.
Drew Pine got them the win last week, and I know Oklahoma sucks, but you know what though? With that pass rush, I'm gonna take South Carolina.
Okay, I don't blame you.
All right, Boise at San Jose State. San Jose State at home plus 13.5. Are you taking the dogs?
No, I think I would take Boise State in this one. Nevada played them close. Again, talked about this. Nevada, they're going to turn it around. They have a very good coach. I think though this is a bit of again, Boise State playing for style points. San Jose State is not a team that's going to run the ball. They're going to pass the ball a lot of quick 3 and outs, more time for Ashton Genty and that Boise State offense to put up points.
I'm looking at what time this is. This is at 7 p.m. Eastern, so it's only
4.
an afternoon game. Yeah.
San
Jose. If it was a night game, I might be inclined to take the points. But all right, and then Arizona State at Kansas State. That's actually a really fun game. Kansas State 7.5 point favorites. I'll go first. I feel like I'm going to take K-State, and it's a 2-part thing because I've predicted the Colorado Buffaloes to go to the playoff, and I need Arizona State to beat BYU for that to happen, basically, or part of it. And so I think ASU will lose here and beat BYU.
We'll lose here.
Lose
sure.
by more than 8.
I could see it.
Yeah,
I could see it. Yeah, and I think
Is
K-State
Scatabo
is
still hurt?
I don't know if he'll be ready for this game. We'll see. So we're recording, obviously, if you don't know, we record Wednesday night. I think that's something we'll find out like Saturday.
Yeah.
He's not 100% though.
But he'll be ready for BYU.
He'll be ready for BYU. Oh, yeah.
All right, and then last game is Tennessee at Georgia. Biggest game of the weekend. Georgia minus 9.5. It's a lot of points for a team that has an extra loss compared to Tennessee. I'm going to take Tennessee, but it doesn't mean Georgia's not going to win.
Well, so the line is now like 11.5, 12.
Oh,
even.
wait, what?
Yeah, because Nico's out.
Nico's not playing. That's right.
So Tennessee has a former walk-on, Grant Moore. I think it's Grant Moore is his name? Something like that.
Former walk-on?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. What's his name?
Heupel knows quarterbacks.
Is it Grant Moore? No, what's his name? Shoot,
Has he had to play as a backup at any point this year?
I mean, last week,
like in some garbage time, maybe.
Yeah, he went like 5. He went 5 of 8 for like 38 yards.
Grant, yeah, G Moore, Gaston.
Gaston.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I kind of like Tennessee.
I mean, is Gaston Moore a downgrade from Nico?
Yeah, probably. Again, it's like
I'm being a little harsh on Nico, but I'm just saying
it's the big playability of Nico is what you're missing out of this.
Yeah.
So I think it's too many points. I think if you wait a little bit for the news and the bets to trickle in on Georgia, get this to like 13.5, then take Tennessee right before kickoff, that could be the move. But again,
so you're saying I'm not getting value at 9.5.
No, I think then again though, Pete,
what does value matter if you get the pick right?
Exactly. And also betting against Kirby Smart with their backs against the wall in Athens at night against their arch rival.
Yeah, like think about what they did to Texas in that first half.
Think about how dumb you're going to feel when Georgia's up like 37-10 in the third quarter.
Oh, I'm going to feel real dumb.
And they got all those cool LED lights going and Ugas on the sidelines. And they look like they have a whole team of Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett there in candy apple red.
You talked me into it.
Yeah.
I'm taking them.
Yeah.
I'm taking them. All right. Georgia minus 9.5. I'm in. That's going to do it for the podcast. Make sure to subscribe on Sons of Saturday YouTube, Sons of Saturday podcast feed, the 2 Deep podcast feed. Sam, today I just changed the name of the podcast on our like icon on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts today. It used to be 2 Deep Hokies Athletic Past and Present because we did Memory Lane and we do CFP Monday and all that stuff. So under the influence, it didn't go for all of the shows. That's why it's been Hokies Athletics Past and Present for a little over a year now. Now it just says 2 Deep, the longest running Hokies podcast. It's not really,
I love it.
It's not really a name. It's more like 2 Deep and a description.
I like it.
I wanted to get Hokies in there though. Like it has to be on.
That's some good SEO, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and people can look at it if like say, oh, we're playing tech. Like, let me see what's going on. Who is a good pod? Oh, the longest running Hokies podcast. I'll
That's you. That's you. It's not me. I'm year one.
But that's okay. But yeah, so you can find us there. Make sure you're subscribed. If you want to give us a rating on Spotify, that'd be much appreciated. Like the video. And until next time, when we'll be previewing, we'll do college football Monday, but we will be previewing Duke next week as well. Go Hokies.
Go Hokies.